The house hasn't changed much. Same street, same floor plan as the one 3 doors down. Two couples bought both of them in 2004, the same week, the same lender, the same 30-year loan at the same rate. They stood in nearly identical kitchens and signed nearly identical paperwork. 22 years later, one of them owns their home outright. The other still owes $241,000 and won't be free of it until 2049. Nothing dramatic split them apart. Just one quiet choice made on an ordinary afternoon, repeating itself in silence for 2 decades. One choice, 2 directions. There's a crack in the driveway when you move in. Nothing structural, just a hairline fracture running from the garage door to the edge of the lawn, the kind that was probably there before the last owner ever parked a car on it. You notice it the first weekend, hosing dust off the concrete while the moving truck idles at the curb. In one version of your life, you patch it, forget about it, and move on with your morning. That afternoon, you call your bank and set up something small, an extra $175 a month, routed straight to principal. Nobody suggests it. You don't run a spreadsheet. It's just what's left over after the essentials, and sending it feels better than watching it disappear into nothing in particular. You don't mention it to anyone. There's nothing to mention. It's a Thursday. In the other version of your life, you stand on that same driveway and feel the crack differently. Not like a flaw exactly, more like a symbol of everything the house isn't yet. The bathroom tile is decades old. The backyard fence leans 2 degrees off plumb. This is supposed to be your home, and it doesn't feel finished. By the second month, you've opened a home equity line for $27,000, and a contractor's crew is tearing out the bathroom. New tile, new fixtures, a walk-in shower that finally looks like something out of a magazine. Standing in the middle of the dust and drop cloths, it finally feels like yours. That feeling is real. It costs $27,000 plus interest, and it is real. Both of you are living on the same street, paying $1,204 a month on a 30-year mortgage at 6.1%, both earning around $51,000 a year. You're a claims adjuster. Your neighbor teaches middle school science. Neither of you is behind, neither is ahead. The starting line is still level, except it isn't, because one of you just added $27,000 in new debt to a house you've owned for 8 weeks, and the other quietly started pulling a payoff date closer, month after month, with nobody around to notice or applaud it. That $175 a month isn't dramatic. It won't move the needle this year. It barely dents year 2. But a 30-year mortgage at 6.1% runs almost entirely on interest in its early life. In year 1, close to $920 of your $1,204 payment goes to the bank, not to the balance you actually own. The extra $175 changes that math slowly, then all at once. It shortens the loan. It shrinks the number interest gets calculated against. It's doing work you won't be able to see clearly for 10 more years. The HELOC is doing something too, just slower and quieter in the opposite direction. It stacks a second payment on top of the mortgage. It converts equity you just built back into debt. And it plants something less visible than either of those. A habit. The house becomes a place where the gap between wanting something and borrowing for it shrinks to almost nothing. You weren't reckless. You wanted a bathroom that didn't look like 1994, and the equity was sitting right there, waiting to be used. That's a completely ordinary decision. Ordinary isn't the same as free. The patched driveway and the gutted bathroom are only the opening move. What comes next? The new job offer, the better school zone, the phone call from an agent who says the timing has never been better, is where these 2 lives, still standing on the same street today, start pulling apart for good. Because the real cost of this house was never the mortgage payment. It was always going to be what you did the first time somebody told you it was time to trade up. The tax nobody puts on the closing statement. The call comes in spring of 2009. A friend of a friend, a realtor with the practiced ease of someone who has closed hundreds of deals, mentions that the market's turned a corner. Your house has gained value. You got your first real raise in 3 years, and your husband just found out he's getting a transfer that would put him 20 minutes closer to a better district. The new listings on the north side have bigger yards, an extra bedroom, room for the family you're planning to grow. It sounds, in the realtor's confident shorthand, like a good window. You think about the bathroom you redid. How good it finally feels to walk into. Then you think about the new house, the extra room, the yard big enough for a swing set. You say yes. Here's what nobody explains at the closing table. Every time you sell one home and buy another, somewhere between 8 and 10% of the property's value simply evaporates. Not into your equity, not into the new place. Gone. Agent commissions run 5 to 6% of the sale price. Closing costs, title fees, transfer taxes, and escrow charges add another 2 to 3% on top. On a house worth roughly $195,000 in 2009, That friction costs somewhere between $15,600 and $19,500, money spent before you spend a single night under the new roof. Now weigh that against what 4 years of payments actually built. 4 years of $1,204 a month is just under $58,000 sent to the bank. But in the early stretch of a 30-year loan at 6.1%, most of every payment is interest. The equity you genuinely built in those 4 years lands somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000. The transaction costs of moving erase nearly all of it. You walk out of one house and into another, and land almost exactly where you started financially. You didn't do anything foolish. You did something completely normal. That's exactly what makes it expensive. In the other version of your life, nothing happens that spring. No agent's phone call, no closing table, no wire transfer to a title company. The crack in the driveway is still there, patched and forgotten. The $175 has gone out automatically on the first of the month for 4 straight years. Nobody has noticed. Nobody has said anything about it at dinner. But here's what that Thursday transfer quietly built. Your principal balance sits lower than it should for a loan this young. The interest portion of your payment has been shrinking a little more each cycle because the number it's calculated against keeps getting smaller. You're ahead of the amortization curve in a way that shows up nowhere anyone would ask about. Not your credit score, not your bank balance, nowhere visible. It just lives in the math, compounding quietly while you go about your week. Same street, same starting point, 4 years apart now. One of you has reset the clock. The other has 4 years of real, invisible momentum. And the version of you that moved isn't finished moving. Because the logic that made the first trade-up feel reasonable, better job, growing family, better zip code, doesn't disappear after one transaction. It gets easier to reach for. The HELOC made borrowing feel routine. The sale made equity feel like cash on hand. The new house made getting ahead feel like something you do by changing addresses, which is exactly the mindset you're carrying when 2021 arrives and rates fall lower than anyone alive has ever seen them. Cheaper money, heavier chain. By early 2021, the number everyone's repeating is 2.65%. 30-year fixed, an all-time low. The Fed has held rates near zero since the pandemic hit, and the mortgage market is reacting exactly the way you'd expect. Your brother refinanced in December and hasn't stopped bringing it up at family dinners. Your financial guy, a soft-spoken man named Rob you've been meaning to call back for 2 months, finally reaches you and says a window like this won't stay open long. You've been in the second house 11 years now. The kids are almost through elementary school. The neighborhood is good, genuinely good, but the house has started to feel snug in a way it didn't a decade ago. There's a new development 15 minutes out with bigger lots and the kind of open layout you've wanted since the bathroom remodel back in 2009. At 265%, the payment on a $365,000 house there is actually lower than what you're paying now. You run the numbers on your phone at midnight on a Sunday. It works. It more than works. Roll in the equity, clear the HELOC balance that's been sitting there since the remodel, cover the down payment, and still land with a smaller monthly bill than today. You call Rob back in the morning. Here's what the calculator app never showed you that Sunday night. Every 30-year mortgage front loads its interest the same way. In year one of any new loan, roughly 75 to 80% of each payment goes to interest, not principal. You knew that once. You felt it in the first house, watching the balance barely budge for years. But 11 years into your second mortgage, that ratio had finally tipped. You were paying more principal than interest each month, for the first time. The loan was genuinely shrinking. A new mortgage resets that clock straight back to year one. You are 46 years old, and you've just signed another 30-year note. Make every payment on schedule, never move again, and this loan clears in 2051. You'll be 76. The rate went down, the debt went back up. What felt like optimization, pulling equity, lowering the payment, locking in a once-in-a-generation rate, was the lending system doing exactly what it's built to do. It made starting over look like a smart move. What the industry calls leveraging your equity is, in practice, a remarkably efficient way to stay in debt for the rest of your working life. In the other version, early 2021 passes quietly. The same 2.65% headlines show up in your feed, but the version of you still in the first house runs a different set of numbers. Your remaining balance is now under $31,000. 16 years of an extra $175 a month have done exactly what compounding does when nobody interrupts it. It's pulled the payoff date forward by years. You're not refinancing, you're not resetting anything. You're watching a number get smaller every month and doing nothing else. Nothing else is the entire point. While the other version of you is celebrating a lower payment, You are 5 or 6 years from having no payment at all. The number you can't unsee. It's 2026, 22 years since that Thursday. You're 50. Both versions of you got up this morning, made coffee, went to work. From the outside, the two lives look similar, same age, same city, comparable income. But the actual arithmetic distance between them is the kind of number that doesn't feel real until it's written down. So here it is. In one version, your remaining mortgage balance is roughly $14,000. That's what 22 years of $1,204 a month, plus $175 extra every single month without a gap, does to what started as a $185,000 loan. You could write that check from savings this afternoon and own the house free and clear before dinner. You don't even need to. At your current pace, the balance clears within the next 10 months regardless. Either way, you're standing somewhere most people never reach, a paid-off house before retirement. When the last payment posts, your monthly housing cost drops to taxes and insurance, roughly $260 a month in this market. The $1,204 that's left your account every month for over 2 decades doesn't vanish. It redirects. You set up an automatic transfer the same way you set up the $175 back in 2004. And now $1,204 a month flows into a low-cost index fund instead. No announcement. Just a number moving from one place to another on a Thursday. In the other version, you're carrying roughly $241,000 on the house you refinanced into in 2021. The move that felt smart that January locked you into a loan that won't resolve until 2051. You're 50 years old. The mortgage will outlast your career. The house is genuinely beautiful, the layout is everything you wanted, and you'll be paying for it until you're 76. Now add up what the two moves actually cost. The 2009 sale and the 2021 refinance together consumed somewhere between $29,000 and $38,000 in commissions, closing costs, title fees, transfer taxes, and escrow charges. Not $1 of that bought a house you still own. It passed through your hands on its way to a brokerage, a title company, a county office. You paid it because everyone pays it. It's normal. It's also permanent. If that $29,000 to $38,000 had stayed invested instead, dropped into an S&P 500 index fund back in 2009 and left untouched, it would be worth somewhere between $260,000 and $340,000 today. That's not a guess. The S&P 500 averaged roughly 12% annually across the 17 years from 2009 to 2026, a stretch that includes a global pandemic and 2 separate bear markets. That's what the number looks like when you stay invested through all of it. The version of you who stayed in the first house didn't earn that $250,000. They simply never lost the seed money that would have grown into it. That's the invisible number. Not the extra bedroom, not the school ratings, not the walk-in shower or the lower payment that 2.65% made possible for a moment. The number that actually explains the gap between these two lives never once appeared on a listing sheet. It's the compounding cost of deciding to leave. Both of you made a payment every month for 22 years. One of you is nearly finished, the other has 25 years left. And the only real explanation for the distance between them isn't income or luck or timing. It's a single decision, repeated at moments that each felt completely reasonable in isolation, and the quiet, unglamorous alternative of staying put and letting the math run without interruption. The oak you didn't plant? You drive past the first house on a Thursday afternoon in September, not planning to. A stalled light rerouted you through the old neighborhood, and you slow down without deciding to. The house looks smaller than you remember. Someone repainted it a deep charcoal with black trim. The driveway's been repoured, no crack anymore. There's a trampoline in the side yard, the kind with the safety net around it. Someone's kids bounce there now. Someone else starts their mornings in the kitchen you never got around to renovating. Someone else hears the specific creak the back door makes in January. Then you see the oak, front right corner of the lot, exactly where you planted it the second week you lived there. A $22 sapling from the garden center, barely taller than the mailbox, the kind that doesn't look like it will survive its first frost. You forgot about it almost immediately. You were busy with the driveway, the new job, the ordinary momentum of a life just getting started. The oak is taller than the roofline now. It went from a twig in a plastic pot to something that shades half the yard, and it did all of that without you. You left. It stayed. The roots went down while you were somewhere else, buying and selling and resetting and trading up. Now it's enormous and permanent, and it belongs to whoever lives there, which isn't you. You sit in the car a moment longer than you mean to. The financial version of that oak isn't complicated. It's the $175 a month you didn't set aside. It's the $29,000 to $38,000 in transaction costs that left your life on the way to somebody else's closing statement and never got the chance to compound into anything. It's the amortization clock you reset twice, back to year one, back into the interest-heavy years. Because the rate was good, the neighborhood was better, the room made sense at the time. All of that was true. None of it was free. What nobody tells you at the closing table is that every house you buy is a tree you're planting. The value was never in the transaction, never in the upgrade, the equity you pulled, the rate you locked, the bathroom that finally felt right. The value was in the years, the uninterrupted, unremarkable years of staying put and letting the math run without interference. The version of you that stayed in the first house turns 50 this year and is weeks from a final mortgage payment. Not refinanced, not reset, the same loan from the same Thursday, nearly paid in full. That person isn't wealthy in any way that photographs well. They drive an older sedan. They take one trip a year. Their house wouldn't make it onto anyone's feed. But they're about to redirect over $1,200 a month, every month, for the rest of their working life, into an index fund, quietly, on a Thursday, the same way they've handled everything else. That's what staying actually looks like. Not a story anyone tells at dinner, not a number that shows up anywhere visible, just a tree that got big while you were paying attention to something else. You put the car in drive and pull away from the curb. The tree stays. The question that belongs to you now. You already know which version of this story you're living, not because you've made bad decisions, because you've made normal ones. The upgrade that made sense, the rate too good to pass up, the house that finally felt like yours. Every one of those moments was reasonable. Everyone carried a cost that didn't show up until years later, in a number nobody warned you about. Here's what's true right now, today. Whatever you decide next, stay or go, will compound for longer than it feels like it should in the moment you decide it. There's a house you're living in right now. There's something specific about it no bigger square footage will ever replace. A window, a creaky stair, the way morning light hits the kitchen table on a Saturday. That detail isn't nothing. That detail isn't nothing. That detail isn't nothing.